Okay. So the goal is to get these pin headers onto this thing. So probably the most common way to solder them is like that. And that makes this the kind of thing that you can like plug into a female socket header, or they're called like shields in the Android world. But because I plan on using it primarily not as something you plug in, but as something you plug into with these sorts of connectors, I'm gonna put the headers on the other way. So I'm gonna do it like this. It does make these jumpers a little more of a pain to pull out maybe, and it makes this switch, the reset switch, maybe a little bit of a pain to get at, but for my purposes, that's my preference. Okay, so what that means is that we really just want to make a clean connection on this side of it. So between these pins and those little metal circles. So wiping it down with alcohol is always a good idea, but as well as a bit of flux. Oh, there we go. There we go. So just scrub a bit of flux on there. Now flux really just helps the solder flow. So if the surface is like imperfect, it'll stop it from gunking up on top of things. Okay. I think that looks good. So what I'll do is flux both sides, and then I'll solder both sides at the same time. So I already have my soldering iron going. Mine warms up pretty quick, but I have a decent soldering iron, which is off camera. Yours may not heat up so fast. So I have a couple of different soldering thicknesses, but I'm going to use the real little one for this. And I'm going to try to get a decent picture of what it actually looks like. Here's my soldering iron here. And I'm going to just check the temperature. If it's hot enough, it should melt this thick stuff pretty quick, and it does. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is feed solder onto this. So that's actually way more solder than I needed. I'm trying to do it while looking through the camera, which is maybe harder than it sounds. But that's okay. And we'll get it tacked in, and I'll do that on both sides.
And by tacked in, I just mean I'll prevent it from falling out. And hold it in place a bit. Wow, that looks so bad. So maybe could heat this up a little bit more. Turn up the temperature a little bit. But zoom back out. Mostly straight, as you can see. Doesn't have to be perfect. Actually, this one I could maybe swing out just a little bit.
The solder is not happy. There we go. Looks a little goofy, but if you leave it out at an angle, it just gives you a little bit more room. So I'm going to do the same thing to this guy. Well, that is much cleaner. I don't know how this other side got so gunked up. What you can't see is I'm stabbing soldering iron into this tip cleaner like this. It's very good to have one of these. It gets the caked on solder off of your tip, and also a wet sponge or a paper towel. I'm gonna reflux this guy a little bit.
This looks particularly nasty. Okay.
If you do have one of these, make sure the cap's on really tight. They dry out super easy. Okay, then the gist is doing the same across the rest of them. So you want to hold the soldering iron pretty snug on the contact that you're trying to solder to. Good, because you want it to get hot enough so that the solder will bond to it nicely. So a good way to tell is you hold on to it until you see it start to get maybe a little shiny, and you melt the solder on the pad itself and the pin instead of on the iron. And then get that chunk out of the way. You can see how it makes a decent little
Mound. This is maybe not the best camera for this, but you get the gist of it. Okay, almost done with the side. I'm going to clean my soldering iron again. Come on.
That's one side done. Let's see how it looks. Could be better, but I'll take it. Okay. Time for the next side.
This side is coming together much better. I think you can see that on camera, how when the pad gets to temperature, it changes its texture, or its apparent texture a little bit. As you can see the solder on the pad heat up. That's generally how you know when it might be ready to start flowing solder. This side is coming together a lot nicer for me. should be all of them for the blue pill board. Let's give that a look.
Looks okay. Not my best work necessarily, but it's all there. You see how it's kind of gunked up with all the flux and resin from the solder, but you can wipe that off later with alcohol. That's it, looks good. So next, I'm gonna solder up the CO2 sensor if I can find him. There he is. Now him, I'm gonna solder him up that way just so, maybe, I don't know, what do you think? What'll be easier? Easier to read it that way? Easier to read it that way. I'm gonna choose to do mine this way, but obviously you're welcome. Solder yours any way you like. So same as before. I probably could have cleaned this with alcohol first as well, actually, but just some flux on there is fine. Okay, same deal here. Heat up the pad. Make sure he's clean. Does not take a lot. Probably goes without saying, but do be careful about touching the soldering iron with your skin, because it is hot enough to just sort of vaporizes a layer of skin. Does not feel good. Uh-oh. That was being difficult. Like I didn't want to stick at all. There we go. That's a bit better. You know what, soldering it on that side maybe makes a whole lot of sense just because there's no components. Like trying to avoid the things on this side might be a little bit of a pain. But, yep, that should be it. I didn't realize you can't see that the same way on camera. Okay. Looks pretty good. I probably could have straightened him out a little bit. It's got a little bit of a lean to it, but you know, maybe I will just a little bit. If I can do it without heating it up too much. Yeah, I'm starting to melt it. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it as is. It's fine. Perfect is the enemy of good, right? Okay. So that's it. That's him soldered up. And him. And that should be all we need to do. And that's it.